Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of This Week in Plymouth. I am your host and your town manager, Derek Brindisi. This afternoon, we have two special guests with us here today. Roxanne Whitbeck is the town's Veteran Services Officer. Welcome, Roxanne. And then Mr. Joe Goldberg, who is our Events Director and Coordinator of Memorial Hall. So, Joe, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So before we begin, this is a special edition because we're going to focus on really how the Veterans Office intersects with Memorial Hall. And I think they do that in a very special way. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But Roxanne, let's start with you. You've been working for the town for a long time now. And I'm sure many of our veterans know who you are, but many others probably don't know who you are. So could you just give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you do for the town?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I am a 13-year Navy veteran, and I started out in the building department, went to the clerk's office, and ended up in the veterans office, which was where I found my niche. The Veteran Services is now part of the Health and Human Services Division, and anything with the word veteran in it, we make sure that the person comes in and gets the information that they need.
And how long have you been the VSO for the town?
Approximately 17 years.
17 years. Thank you.
Thanks
for doing that. We appreciate that. And I'm sure all the veterans. How many veterans do we have in town?
I usually say about a 10% of our total population, so about 67,000.
That's a big population. And you're the only VSO we have in town.
6,700, I'm sorry. 6,700?
6,700?
Yeah, I say.
But again, 6,000, like you're the only person in town servicing 6,000 of our veterans. So that's a lot of work. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Roxanne. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the work that you're doing for our veterans here in this community. Mr. Goldberg, so you and I have worked together for some time now.
Yes.
And I know you've been doing a lot. You're over there in Memorial Hall all by yourself most of the time.
Yeah.
And, we don't often get you out of that building. So thank you for joining us today. Can you just describe to the folks your role here in the community?
Yeah, actually, from 2008, 2012, I managed Memorial Hall for the town of Plymouth as a private contractor. Right after COVID, the building reopened, and Barry de Blasio and Ann Slusser interviewed me to come back. So I've been back for almost 4 years now. We've had pretty big names of shows in there, but we do a lot of more than just concerts there. We do weddings, we do private events. We keep the building pretty active as best we can. But not only that, it's just overseeing the maintenance of the building, and also the big part of it is we're going to be talking about is the Hall of Flags and how we interact with the veterans. I also fall under Health and Human Services as well, and also a veteran, so I deal with Roxanne quite a bit. So.
Oh, thank you both for your service. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Yeah. No, we are all colleagues and veterans and have served this country over many years. So, Joe, I do want to touch on one item though with Memorial Hall. Again, this is a building that the town has owned for a very long time now. Yes. It needs some work, moving in the future. We'll talk a little bit about that. But can you talk about the history of this building? Yeah. How long ago, and maybe why the building was erected many years ago?
Yeah, actually, we're coming up on our 100th anniversary.
You are.
The building was actually in the 1920s. It was actually planned out, and construction started in 1924, 1925. The building opened in 1926, and it was to honor the World War I and Spanish-American War veterans. We have a museum in there, and we also have the Spanish-American War meeting room. So we try to honor the veterans in there. And that was really the focal point of building Memorial Hall. It was a community space where we can, one, honor our veterans, but two, where we can come together as a town, as a community. And some of the things that were there was they used to show movies, town movies there years ago. They did some roller skating. Donkey basketball, I believe, was the big thing back in the day. But yeah, it's hosted a wide variety of community events there. And we actually had high school graduation up until a few years ago happening there. So
that building.
Yeah.
Now, because I know a lot of other cities and towns across the Commonwealth have buildings like Memorial Hall. Like, for example, Worcester has Memorial Auditorium.
Yes.
It's a huge structure. And not being a historian, but I believe that was constructed in the same era to honor the veterans that had served their country and we're from the city of Worcester. Are you familiar with other similar structures?
Actually, the sad part is a lot of the communities did this, had community buildings like this, but they've allowed them to kind of go by the wayside because of maintenance and different things. It's a lot of money to keep these buildings up to speed and relevant in today's market.
Right.
One of the ones the community reached out to us was Rentham. They have a building almost identical to Memorial Hall that has been closed for many years, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, and they haven't really moved forward. But Plymouth has done an amazing job keeping the building up to date and up to code. And you know, and as you know, we've run into some hiccups along the way the last few years. But I mean, in 2000, they did a decent renovation. In 2006, they really finished that completion. So now, being 20 plus years later, it's time to redo that again. And Memorial Hall, she's beautiful. I mean, I love the old building. The acoustics is great in there. And anybody, I've said, it's my own little phrase, Memorial Hall is the heartbeat of Plymouth. Anybody that's grown up in Plymouth or has lived any time in Plymouth had something to do with it, whether it's a high school graduation, a dance, or town meetings. It really comes back to the Memorial Hall and the veterans. So.
Yeah, and really, this is how it ties so nicely into the work that Roxanne does, because when people drive by Memorial Hall, it reminds you of, maybe a parent or a grandparent or aunt or uncle who served, at some point, and it sort of honors them for everything they've done. And I can tell you, though, to your point about Rentham, the Worcester Auditorium is a massive building, and it's been shuttered probably for 20 years now. Yeah. And I think in large part because these buildings were erected for a certain purpose, and now with the evolution of convention centers and these convention spaces, those buildings can no longer serve kind of like 21st century. But we're working on that, and we're going to make those improvements, because as we've talked about a lot in this community, that, we love this building, and we think it can be the premier venue for folks to come and enjoy a show in the future. And so, that's a goal that I think we collectively have. But, getting back to the veterans, and we're going to talk about the great work, the renovations of the Hall of Flags, right? Yes. Which I was shocked. And I walked in with Carl Anderson, a facilities director, on the Veterans Day event. And I didn't realize, I heard about the grant, but I didn't realize what was happening behind closed doors. Who can talk about how we were able to renovate that hall area, starting with the grant?
Actually, it was a little more than a year ago, Tiffany Pox came to me and said, hey, Joe, there's this grant from the state. It's a matching grant. Do you think we can apply for this? And so Roxanne and I talked about it, and we said, yeah, this is something we can definitely do. Over the last, when I came back almost 4 years ago, when I walked into Memorial Hall, it was like a time capsule. Like, you sealed it and didn't really do anything with it. And so I recognized, like, wow, the paint's peeling, ceilings need repairing, the columns are in disarray. And Bob Davison, who's done a fantastic job trying to upkeep it, is limited in what his resources was. So when this happened, I sat down with my boss, Ann Slusser, and said, hey, can we use some of the revolving fund? I talked to the DPW. Roxanne and I talked to the veterans groups. We had meetings with them. And we were able to pull pieces together. And Carl Anderson was a huge piece in that. I mean, we had to spend beyond the grant, and he was able to find the funding to help us get those ceilings repaired and the columns and stuff. So
it's amazing. And so I thank you both for taking that initiative, because I know you both are super busy, 6,700 veterans, right? And all the events you are coordinating. And so to stop and take the time and say, we have this great space, but, maybe it is a little dated, right? It needs fresh paint. It needs to, help looking at, working on the displays. And we honored Bob Davidson, I think it was 2 years ago, Roxanne, at a Memorial Day event, right? Yes. For his contributions to this community. And I think, as I understood it, Bob has really kind of been the gatekeeper for everything in the Hall of Flags. And so we appreciate all of his work over the years. And he's been doing this for a very long time.
Yes. Yeah. He's I invited him to come today, but he's kind of like a behind-the-scene kind of guy. But yeah, he does a lot. He did a lot for that, and still continues to. I think he thinks of it as it's like his project, and he did a great job with it.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenon. So, I would say to the folks at home, if you haven't had a chance to visit Memorial Hall recently, we just unveiled, and I say we, the town, unveiled the new Hall of Flags on Veterans Day, which was a great tribute to doing that. But you have to check it out. I mean, it really came out great, and I appreciate all that you've done. And speaking of Veterans Day, we really only stop twice a year, I think, really to think about, Veterans Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Roxanne, can you talk a little bit about, some of our guest speakers that, that attended on Veterans Day and some of the message that they were able to deliver?
I was honored to have our guest speaker this year, Amanda Tipton. She shared her story, and our focus was the suicides that are happening, and we're just trying to put a face to it because it's real, it's growing, and she was personally affected by it. So she had the grace and dignity to be able to get up and tell her story in front of everybody. So it was really quite moving.
Yeah, she was great, and there was a lot of folks who thanked her after her speech, and we're really appreciative that she was able to join us in Plymouth. But her message speaks to your work, right? And I say that I think we have a really perfect trifecta, right? So we have here in town, we have our VA clinic up on Long Pond Road, which you invited me a couple years to attend. They had a little bit of their own ribbon cutting a couple years ago. We have you who have been here for some time now as our VSO. And then most recently, the Volunteers of America just opened up their location in downtown Plymouth as well. Can you kind of talk about this trifecta of veteran services that are really taking shape in our community?
It's so wonderful, Derek, because for many, many years, we didn't have the resources in town. Like, we didn't have the clinic. That was something my predecessor had fought hard and long for. And to have Volunteers of America there, it's almost like a perfect marriage. What our office can't do, they can pick up the ball and run with it. And they can do a lot more with state money than what we can do. So it's a perfect marriage. I'm so glad to have them on board. We also have Father Bill's, which is another great resource for us. So I think that there's been a need. People said Plymouth was in need, and we've got the services coming in that are just so helpful for our veterans.
And Plymouth is a growing community. We know that. So as Plymouth grows, our veteran population will grow. We still have service members who are deployed overseas. They're still in conflict, although it's not as highly publicized as it once was.
Right.
So we still have hundreds and thousands of veterans who are coming back to our communities, looking for job placement, looking for healthcare services. And so, if a veteran is watching this show today, what can they do if they're seeking services? What would you?
I would suggest, first of all, they come down to our office, because if we can't provide the service, we can get them to the resource that can provide the service. We take a lot of pride in anybody that comes in our office to just say, hey, listen, you are welcome here. We will do whatever we can to help you, whether it's education benefits, whether it's, public. We have an assistance program for veterans that are 200% below the poverty level, whether it's filing a VA claim. We can do all of that. So it's really quite an honor to be able to do all of that.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and they a lot of veterans aren't aware of the various services that are out there. And some of them may need help and may, for whatever reason, maybe their pride gets in the way. They don't want to ask for help, right? So I know, having been in your office, that everything's private, it's confidential,
very confidential,
behind closed doors. So folks need to know that if there's anything that they need,
right,
even if you, like you said, even if you can't provide it, maybe someone else can provide that
service. We will
service.
give them the resources that can.
How can they reach you?
Well, my number at the town hall is 508-747-1620, and my direct extension is 10173, or my admin assistant, Joanne, is 10172. And if you get our voicemail, we promise we'll call you back.
That's great. So getting back to some of the services, one item you and I have talked about recently with our finance team is the HEROES Act, right? So more services are coming for our veterans. Governor Haley just enacted this HEROES Act. One thing I know we are working on together is whether or not we can take advantage of the veterans tax exemption.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about the HEROES Act?
Sure. The HEROES Act does have a provision for allowing municipalities to double what's currently out there. It's a local option, so it has to be adopted by town meeting.
This is for their real estate tax.
For the real estate taxes, right. But there's also a provision in there for veterans that are 100% service connected to get their excise waived through the town because of this, and also to pay no registry fees. Because there's a disabled plate that one could get that also excuses sales tax, but the one that's in the HERO Act just does the excise tax and the registry fees. But it's not putting a special plate on your car either.
Right, gotcha. So again, if you're a veteran and you don't know whether or not you qualify, just reach out to your office, right?
Exactly.
And you can do that. And I do know right now under the existing real estate tax exemptions, it's approximately $500,000. And so we are working hard to be able to match that, through this year's budget process. So we're going to start that budget process in early December. We'll be presenting to the select board the FY26 budget on December 17th, and hopefully we can start inching towards providing additional services to our veterans through the real estate tax exemption. So more to come on that. So
Great, thank you. That would be wonderful.
yeah,
Thank you,
no,
Jared.
and we recognize that, and we want to do what we can and participate when we can. Joe, getting back to Memorial Hall, you and I have had a lot of conversations with Michelle Brady, Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Ian Slessa, Director of Recreation, who you work very closely with, on Memorial Hall and bringing it back to its former glory.
Yeah.
What are the plans in place? What are the conversations? What are the ideas that you have so we can bring that those ideas to fruition?
Yep. Actually, we've been working with the DPW, and we've had, I believe we awarded a contract to an engineering firm to come in to do an overall design of Memorial Hall, what we have right now, what we need to work on, and what we need to get us to being not only a structurally sound building, but a building that meets today's standards for entertainment value. One of the key things is sealing the building, so we have some water issues that we're taking care of. Then we're looking at some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that people don't realize. Like, we just added a brand new sound system. When we came back from opening up after COVID, our former sound system totally crashed. It was 20 years old. It was time. And the town put in a $360,000 sound system that is premier. And in the last year and a half that we've had it in, big names that have used it is like Ace Frehley, Lyle Lovett, the Indigo Girls. They've all used our new sound system. They loved it. So part of the new design will add a lighting feature to that, loading in for equipment so that we're having a light show that matches the sound show. So, and when we do that, it lessens the money for promoters to come in, and they use that to bring in bigger names. Some of the feedback I'm getting is, wow, I can't believe Memorial Hall has been so busy. We did 106 shows last year.
Wow.
And my goal is to get us to 130, but not just any shows. We're now able to pick and choose as to what shows we bring in and what shows we don't, so we can up that game a little bit and we can compete. So people who live on the South Shore don't have to drive to Boston or Providence or Worcester to go see a show. They're coming to Plymouth, and that means tax money. That's hotel rentals, restaurants. I mean, go to a restaurant in Plymouth during the night of a show, you can't get into them. Sure. So that generates revenue that kind of eases the tax burdens off the people in town. So when I worked at the Boston Convention Center Authority, we used to have a saying, beds and heads, right? Every time you bring somebody in, that head is laying in a hotel bed. So that's money that brings into the town that we wouldn't normally get. So when we bring the Memorial Hall up, it's going to make it more attractive for people to come. It's going to make it more attractive to bring in more business. And so it just helps the town all around.
And so that engineering firm, they're going to start that study, I think, real soon. I think you mentioned that the DPW is going to execute a contract with the engineering firm very soon. And do we know how long that's going to take to do that analysis of the building?
I believe it should be late spring. We should have that analysis pretty much fairly locked up in a design of what we're looking to do. And what I mean by design, like will we be replacing seating? Will we be improving the loading dock? Will we be improving the lighting? The energy,
HVAC?
HVAC. I mean, that's one of the biggest complaints in the summertime. People are like, I'm freezing because the air doesn't move so well. And in the wintertime, the people in the balcony are 100 degrees and it's 50 degrees on the floor. So we're improving that. We're controlling that a lot better. We're making it more energy efficient so that it doesn't cost the town so much money to run Memorial Hall. We just got a grant for the federal government as well to replace a lot of the lighting in Memorial Hall so that we have more energy efficient lighting and it makes it more aesthetically pleasing and kind of keeping us up with the age and the antiquity of the building.
Sure. And I did speak with Mike Cahill, who's our climate resiliency planner, who explained to me about that grant. So, I think just from a energy efficiency, reducing gas house emissions, that's all great. Yeah. But I hope it's also going to provide quality lighting too inside that structure. It seems like some of the old lighting that's in there is probably antiquated and needs to be replaced anyways.
Well, it's funny. During the different, in 2000 and 2006, they did the two different renovations. So we ended up with restoring the old wagon wheel style lights, but then we have gymnasium lights in the middle, and then we have sconces that wasn't original to the building that everybody complains about, that they're too bright or they're not bright enough, or it's just, they're not very eye candy pleasing, I guess you can say.
Well, and that's the comprehensive review, right? Yeah. So even if you're not an engineer and have no understanding of lighting or HVAC, one thing you do know, at least I recognize when I go in there, is the color. There's no color scheme, right? No. You have that big curtain that's like a navy blue. Yep. Your seats are red. Yep. You look in the ceiling, there's green up there. Yep. Even from an aesthetic standpoint, it's just like, geez, we could do better, right? Yes. Not saying it's bad, but we can always make improvements. And getting back to your point of what Memorial Hall brings to this community is it does bring some vibrancy to the downtown area, right? Yes. Because we have Memorial Hall, we have the Spire, which is great. Yeah. But if you take away one of those, it reduces that foot traffic.
It does.
And I can tell you for certainty that that Memorial Hall is having a positive impact on a community for a couple of different reasons. There's a new hotel that is going to be under construction downtown. It's going to be a boutique hotel, just 2 blocks over. And so there's certainly a demand for more, as you said, heads in beds, right? Yep. The fact that there's a hotel that's going to be erected in the next couple months thereafter. And then, you and I were talking to somebody earlier today who was saying that if you look at that area of the downtown, of what it is today compared to what it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, much more vibrant, much more safe. And that is all a direct link to the success that Memorial Hall brings to that area of town, right? Yes. And we're starting to see that throughout scattered. There was all these different pockets in the downtown area, like the old Governor Bradford. Yep. And some of the things that would attract are now gone. We got a new Vitamin C brewery that's there. We have La Baia right next door. Sunny Degrees West is next door. That whole stretch of Water Street has really changed dramatically in the last 3 or 4 years. And the same can be said for what's happening up on Court Street, that part north of Court Street where Memorial Hall is. It's really brought a different sense of tourism. Yep. It's reduced crime. So it's all a credit to the work that you've been doing by bringing in very focused, specific types of entertainment that others may not want to attend to.
It also increases the quality of businesses we bring in. When the old Isaac's restaurant went out of business, that location sat dormant. And to get an upscale restaurant like 71 Degrees coming in and opening its doors increases the clientele that we bring in, the amount more money that they spend. It just, like you said, it changes the whole community. It makes people want to, in the summertime, take a walk in the evening, listen to the music coming through the windows or the walls, and enjoying a restaurant that you can sit outside safely and have a nice meal with a beautiful waterfront. One of the things we talked about not that long ago, we have the cruise ships that come in, is being able to design shows that attract those folks that come off that cruise ship, come have a restaurant, come to one of our restaurants, have dinner, and take in one of our shows. And then, so it's not just, hey, they come in, they hit a couple of gift shops. They're coming in, they're walking our streets, they're seeing how great it is. So when they do get back home and they're like, hey, we want to take a vacation, let's go back to Plymouth again. Remember that time we went there just for the night and had a show and a dinner? It just improves the level of people who want to come and how long they want to stay.
You're right. So, we know that the downtown has changed a lot even over the last 5 years compared to, say, 20 years ago. And I talked to the director of planning, Lee Harmon, who would say when he started here 27 years ago, it was entirely different downtown, right? So I think what the folks need to understand that the success of downtown is really the success of Plymouth. I'm going to tell you why. Because although some of our residents would say, geez, you spend too much money on investing downtown. Well, you got to think about everything that you just described, that because of the success in the tourism industry downtown, now we have a new hotel. So when we can increase our commercial tax base, like say with a hotel, think of all the revenue sources. So our real estate taxes are mitigated on the residential side because of more commercial expansion. We have a hotel motel tax, right? So we have more restaurants, and if we have more hotels, that's more revenue that's generated. That's less, and that money is specifically earmarked for facility improvement. For example, some of that money goes to VSB, the Visitor Service Bureau, and those new revenue sources are then spread out to fund programs and services and infrastructure that ordinarily in other communities, like the last community I came from, that don't have those advantages, they have to go to the residential taxpayer to fund infrastructure improvements. And we're able to do it in such a way that we can take these alternative sources of revenue and put those back to infrastructure improvements so we don't have to raise taxes. And I really think people need to understand kind of this circle that we all work in, because it's all connected somehow. So, again, thank you, for taking the leadership role with Memorial Hall, because again, that's one of the main drivers of tourism in our downtown area. And I know that personally that you reached out to the folks at the American Cruise Lines. They just signed a 5-year agreement, so they're going to be here for the next 5 years. And we want to make those natural connections, so they do come off and they do enjoy a show, whether it's at Memorial Hall, at the Spire, over at Pilgrim Hall, and see what they're all about. So we have a lot of opportunities here in the downtown area. We just have to enhance those. So,
if I could just one more thing, one of the areas that I'm very lucky in being a part of is I was working with Mike Capel and Bonnie Holmes over at the school. They're trying to raise funds to bring the high school band to Honolulu for Pearl Harbor and the anniversary so they could play there. So they came and asked if we could help put on a concert to raise funds for them. So we did. We found a great band that came all the way up to New Jersey to play. And a company like All Dry, right? They're a restoration company who's stationed here in Plymouth. Their owner stepped up and said, what can I do to help? And so they paid the expenses for the band to come up. One Stop Painting come in and helped offset the expenses for the DPW. Cage Titans, they stepped up and helped pay for some of the advertising. So seeing these local businesses, all Plymouth-based, coming in and helping the school do something honorable by going on the other side of the country to honor some veterans over there too. I was very lucky to be a part of that.
We're all lucky, right? I mean, because most communities don't have that. I said, I worked in a city, I worked in a small town, and I worked here in Plymouth, and a lot of communities don't have what Plymouth has to offer. So for business to step up and help our high school students is very unique, and we're lucky to have that in Plymouth. But we are running out of time, and one thing I do want to cover, getting back to the Hall of Flags and Memorial Hall and the work that we do around veterans, is a ribbon cutting ceremony. So we need to make sure that people know in our community the great things that are not only happening in Memorial Hall, but again, what it means to when you walk in that building and think about everyone who served not only Plymouth, but this nation as a whole. you want to talk about the ribbon cutting ceremony? It's going to be on Wednesday, December 11th at 2 p.m.
Yes, and we are sending out invitations to folks to attend. It's a rededication of sorts. It was originally dedicated, I think, in 2013 for our, our most current conflict folks, and then the Vietnam Memorial came up, I think, a year or so after that in 2014. But yeah, it's I think a lot of people stop. A lot of people see that one-of-a-kind display. It's truly amazing. So I'm so glad to be part of that rededication. It's so important.
Yeah, it is, Roxanne. So we are all out of time. So I want to thank you both for coming. And I want to remind the folks at home that on Wednesday, December 11th at 2 p.m., we will have a formal Hall of Flags ribbon cutting ceremony. We expect everyone to attend in the community so that they can see firsthand what's going on. So thank you all for joining. If you want more information, go to our website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. Thank you.